Hello once again, everybody. My name's Mitch. Welcome back to the series I'm Turning 30, a series where I talk about my past, present, and future and the things that have made me me leading up to me turning 30, as well as things that I might do in the future. This week's topic is going to be sports. Thought it would be a fitting thing to talk about with me in the outfit that I'm in right now, at least. In a previous video in the series, I talked about my core memories and I talked about a sports related memory in there. So if you're curious about my basketball view, please go and look at the core memories video. But yeah, let's talk about the role that sports played in my life from a very young age. Throughout my life, as far back as I can remember, I have always been involved in two things: gaming and sports. With sports, I was just put into pretty much every little league that you can imagine except for American football. And we'll start there with football since I think it's kind of the biggest one that's the most prevalent in my life nowadays. I don't know why I was never interested in playing football necessarily as a kid, or why my parents never voluntarily put me in. Maybe it's I never brought up the interest, things like that, but I just never played it. However, I did have a favorite team very early on, around the ages of, I believe, 6 to 8. I started to develop a tendency towards liking a certain team for a very funny reason. So the story goes like this. One of my older brothers played for one of the local high schools in the areas named the Alta Hawks. Now, as you can imagine, the Alta Hawks had a hawk as their mascot. The name started with an A. I was very young at the time. By the time he was playing in high school, didn't really understand the sport myself because I didn't play it, but I knew what the logo looked like at the school and the fact that Alta started with an A. Now, when I would be sitting at home, things would be on the TV, or it might just be on Sports Center, or just like some type of sports channel just in general, showing games, highlights, big plays, things like that. You just saw them on the TV growing up. And I would see a team with the same colors, the same logo, and the acronym ATL at the bottom. And as a kid, I just figured it was that local high school on the TV. And at the time when I started seeing these big plays, there was somebody on the defense of the Atlanta Falcons that had the same last name as my brother. He played the same position, and I thought it was a play of my brother being on this team being shown to people across the nation. So because my brother was playing for this team that I thought was the Alta Hawks on TV, I became a fan of them, kept thinking they were the Alta Hawks for a long time, and then kind of eventually learned that their name was the Falcons when I got older, and then I put two and two together. My brother never played for the Falcons. It was somebody else with that name, and I just didn't know what I was talking about when I was a kid. But by then, I had already really liked the team for a few years, and kind of when I realized that my brother didn't play for the NFL, it wasn't him that was on that team, it was a team down in Georgia. I already had a few years in the team, and Michael Vick had just gotten signed to the Falcons. Now, if you know anything about the Falcons in the past, like 30 years, you definitely know who Vick is. Maybe if you don't know about the Falcons, you know who Michael Vick is. The point is that his first few years with the Falcons were so fun to watch. I grew to love him as a player, learned about other players on the team, and just became an overall bigger fan and kind of solidified my fandom during those years. Was I buying NFL Sunday ticket to watch them? No, but like I actively rooted for them, hoped they would make the playoffs and would eventually win the Super Bowl, which has never happened. But yeah, that's the story of how I became a Falcons fan. Michael Vick came along, the whole dogfighting thing happened. We had one terrible year where we had our head coach leave midway through the season. It was just a terrible year. It was either 1 or 2 years, actually. I can't remember. I think it was just one, it might have been two. But either way, we had a couple rough years as soon as the whole thing with Vic happened and that coach leaving. We had a rough couple times, and then we drafted Matt Ryan, and we had Roddy White on the team, and then we got Julio Jones eventually, and Tony Gonzalez, and we had all these great defensive players like Bierman, our Super Bowl run, and there was just so much good going on the team, and I had just solidified my fandom. So that's kind of the role that football played in my life. I'm now heavily in the fantasy football community as well, so I enjoy playing in several different leagues and different formats and doing that kind of thing as well. So overall, just that experience of me thinking my brother played on an NFL team has shaped my life in a very large way. Going back to some other sports when I was a kid, I also played soccer, I played baseball, and what happened with those ones was, I know with baseball, I played in a couple of little leagues, and I remember I would get flamed by the other kids on the team because I couldn't figure out how to control the direction of the ball when I would throw it when I was a child. And I think it was 2 or 3 seasons that I played with Little League, and I couldn't really figure out how to throw the ball. And I would usually play outfield or base, and I couldn't ever get the ball right to the person or location that I wanted, and I kind of just ended up wanting to quit. So didn't have much of a long baseball career. With soccer, I played until I was about 12 or 13. I played defender the whole time. I really enjoyed soccer. I was just never the greatest at it. I didn't really understand it. I didn't necessarily have great coaches or went to camps or anything, really learned anything. I just kind of went to these small organized little league things, didn't have practices, but just played and kind of figured out how to play through games instead of going to practices and learning drills, dribbling, things like that. It was just like, here's how you shoot, here's how to be coordinated. That's basically it. Like, you kind of just figured out through the motions of playing. I would play soccer a lot at recess as an elementary school student as well. And that's just kind of how the relationship with soccer went. I just kind of stopped around middle school age, I think because I just wasn't as good and people were getting onto teams and I just kind of wasn't interested in that and started focusing on doing other things. And if you're wondering if I've like missed a certain sport or not, I mean, we can kind of get into all the different sports that are on the entire spectrum of sports. For example, hockey. I did play a little bit of street hockey. Never like, again, I didn't have practices, just played in games with friends and things like that. And then with ice hockey, I don't think I've actually played a game of ice hockey. I have skated with a stick and tried to hit a puck like with other people, not even in a game, just like practicing. So I've had experience doing it, but never like actually been active in that community. Around my freshman year of middle school, going into high school, I had always done sports growing up. Like I had mentioned, I basically stopped. Soccer was kind of the last like sport, and I stopped, and I wasn't in sports for a year or two. And my parents convinced me to try to get back into some type of competitive league thing, and I decided to join the track team. Freshman year, I started to go to the practices at the high school that I was going to attend and tried to join the track team and stayed on the track team my entire tenure of high school. Now, I don't like love running or anything, but I felt like I was pretty good at it. I always had really good times in the mile as a kid. I was one of the fastest kids in elementary school, middle school at doing the mile. I always thought I was going to be a long distance runner. I got placed in the sprinter section. That was what the coach decided what would be best for me in high school. So I did sprints all throughout high school, the 100 meter and the 200 meter. These are my times right here for each. But yeah, I had a pretty good time with track. I think I mentioned this in a previous video, but there's a girl that I ended up dating and we got to kind of know each other. And the reason kind of we ended up dating was because of track. It probably helped me expend a lot of energy as a high school student, since that's really the only active thing that I did after kind of abandoning competitive sports after the basketball incident that I mentioned in my core memories video and just not keeping up with soccer. Now, I was also snowboarding at the time, but snowboarding for me didn't ever feel, I know it is a sport, but it didn't ever feel like a sport. Because one, again, I never competed. I never tried to learn how to do like big tricks or anything. I mean, I can like tail grab, I can ollie, I can do a 360 on the board. I could grind like small rails, but it's not like, I don't even seek out those things, even though I can do them. I prefer not to. I prefer just kind of putting in headphones, sliding down the mountain 3 or 4 times a year. And I mean sliding because especially those first few years, you crash a lot. But just going down the mountain and just vibing to music, thinking about whatever's on my mind, and just kind of having a good time. Especially after you've really got the intermediate feeling of snowboarding, it's really satisfying to kind of just go down at whatever speed and just chill. The reason I started snowboarding actually was because of the Olympics, funnily enough. It was in Utah in 2002. I was fairly intrigued by all these things being built and seeing people do things on the TV that was in my area, and I was like, I should be able to do that. So I had my parents enroll me in a little snowboarding program when I was in elementary school. I would go on these buses and they would take me up to the mountain. I would learn from the ski instructors for, I believe it was an hour, and then we would have an hour of free riding, and I kind of learned from there, and eventually I would just start going by myself a few times a year and just vibing out with myself. I also had a couple of friends that introduced me to ping pong when I was in high school, and ping pong is a very intense sport, very serious, and I wanted to get better, so I actually practiced when I was living in Mexico on my mission. I had a little ping pong set that I bought, and I ended up practicing because I was by far the worst out of all of my friends that played. And because of the practice, I'm still the worst, but I'm definitely much better and can at least take points off of people with some ease. Not necessarily always win against people that are very skilled, but I feel very comfortable with where my ping pong skill is now. And even now here in Japan, I actually play with some students that have a ping pong club at high school and help teach them how to get better at ping pong. Not sure if there's any other big major sports that I missed necessarily. I guess I trying to think off a list in my head. I mean, I've played dodgeball. I've never done wrestling. I've never really been into any water sports. I'm not great with water just in general. Not my favorite thing. And maybe more niche sports I'm not super familiar with. I think most people have bowled. I feel like there's just a lot of I feel like sports is such a wide lens and there's so many for you to try. I think there's even local sports to each country that people do, and I enjoy the competitive spirit that goes along with playing sports or engaging in a competition. I wouldn't necessarily say I'm competitive, but I enjoy doing these games or sports with people that they have, because I just think it's such an interesting way into people's culture and lives and seeing kind of what they value, who they are, their personalities. You can really see if they have that over the top competitive spirit or kind of just a competitive but chill, or just kind of lackadaisical type of vibe. You can really feel people out in those type of environments. And then just a couple of caveats here at the end. I think dancing, cheerleading, those type of things, I think those are sports. I guess I haven't done those, so I don't really know the ins and outs, but my sister did cheerleading. I know quite a few dancers, and I feel like it should be included just in sports or be considered a sport in general. They do a lot of things that athletes have to do. Gymnastics is very similar to that vein. Gymnastics are athletes, it's a sport. Now, what's not a sport is esports. Video games in general, they are not sports. They are called esports for a reason. I think calling them sports kind of takes away from the regular physical sports, just in my mind. I just don't equate them to being the same thing. Not saying that they don't obviously put in a lot of time to become athletes in esports. To become at the highest level, you have to do a lot. You have to practice quite a bit. But I do not consider it a sport in just the sport term. It is an e-sport for a reason. Oh, I didn't even talk about golf either. I also golfed. I golfed for a long time, and I do know how to golf. That is the one I forgot. I took golfing lessons for a few years. I took tennis lessons for a few years. Like I said before, I was pretty much put into everything, learned everything, so I could have at least somewhat a decent amount of skill in a lot of the popular sports. But yeah, I think that's all that's really happened in my present and past. Going forward, I would love to see how sports end up progressing. I would like to see how they get better and change, and what happens with championships and who wins and rule changes. I think it's very interesting just to watch pretty much any sport. Some sports are harder to watch, I agree, but I don't think I would ever necessarily be fully bored watching a sports match of any type, even if it is golf or soccer, which I consider probably the two most boring ones to watch. And I'm going to put on screen right now, these are all my different favorite teams throughout different leagues, or favorite players that I have in different leagues. If they don't have a team necessarily, these are all of those. But yeah, that's all I have for today around the sports topic. Let me know if you thought I forgot something, or if you disagree with anything that I've said. I'd love to hear it down in the comments down below. Thank you once again for tuning in to the I'm Turning 30 series. I really appreciate you guys tuning in every single week. And thanks for all the love on the last video. Didn't think I'd ever get over 300 views of just me talking in a room. Thanks again for stopping by. My name is Mitch. I'm turning 30, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.